The Mindful Medic podcast is proudly sponsored by the Medical Benevolent Association of New South Wales, ACT. The MBA is an independent charity that has been supporting doctors in New South Wales and the ACT since 1896. They provide specialised counselling, information, referral and financial assistance to doctors and their families during times of adversity or hardship. Their aim is to provide non-judgmental support so that the doctor or family member recovers their well-being and independence and, wherever possible, returns to their vocation. Their services are free, specialised and no referral is necessary. All contact is kept strictly confidential and they are independent of any regulatory body.
I think deep down, a lot of us don't feel like we're worthy of love and belonging kind of as we are. We have this great fear that we're not enough. And so we try to feel like if I make this amount of money, then I'll be accepted, or if I get this job, or if I have this many friends, or if there's this many followers on social media, or if, we kind of feel like I'm not good looking enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not. And I think we all need to realize that as we are right now, we're enough. Like we are worthy of, by being born, we are worthy of love and we are worthy of belonging and connection. But so many of us spend our lives trying to prove that we are. And the problem there is you never arrive, because you will get a certain job and go, and then a year later go, no, I need this job, then I'll really feel like I can prove that I'm worthy. And then you get that job, you see a better job, or you make a certain amount of money and then you need something else, you need something better. We're so desperately seeking external things to validate our existence when we are already worthy of love. And the people that make you feel like that you are worthy as you are right now, they are the people you should be prioritizing. They're the people you're spending time. And you know who they are instinctively. You know the people that when you're around them, you don't need to impress them. You don't feel like you need to prove yourself. They're the people who you should be spending your time with, because everyone listening to this, you are all worthy of love and belonging as you are right now.
Hello and a warm welcome back to the podcast. A particularly warm welcome if you're joining us for the first time. That powerful introduction were the words and wisdom of today's guest, who I'm delighted to welcome to the show. Many of you may be familiar with the work of Mr. Hugh van Cuylenburg, and if you're not, you will be by the end of this conversation. So Hugh wears many hats as teacher, author, storyteller, athlete, but he's probably most renowned or famous for founding the Resilience Project. And this is an initiative which, from humble beginnings, has grown wings and has now extended to over 900 schools in Australia, a number that's growing all the time. And in the past year or two has reached our homes and workplaces. So Hugh talks about how he founded the project, and we discuss the power of our personal stories and the stories of those around us to influence our own journeys. And I find Hugh's personal story very powerful. We discuss how this led him, with his teacher's mindset, to really formulate this into a more cohesive framework. And this is based on the founding principles of gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. And so we discuss what he calls the GEM principles and what that looks like in practice. As a budding amateur podcast host and avid fan of his own podcast, the Imperfects Podcast, which he co-hosts with actor, comedian, and renowned media personality Ryan Shelton, I dive into the power of podcasting and particularly the power of the Imperfects Podcast in breaking down barriers, in educating and decreasing our stigma around mental illness and mental ill health. I left this conversation uplifted. We revisit many themes that regular listeners to this podcast will have come across. We discuss the great strength in vulnerability, the power of connection, and really the importance of collaboration, particularly when it comes to making positive change and impact. I defy you not to find something of value in this conversation. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you. I am so excited to have Mr. Hugh van Cuylenburg on the podcast. And I've been pretty nervous, so I really hope that I pronounced your name correctly.
No, it's pretty rare I hear it correctly pronounced on the first guy. And I think you got it, Hugh van Cuylenburg. Yeah, it's
with a Scottish slant, Scotty these days.
Well, I tell you, my hero. I felt very. The second I heard you speak, I was very reassured. My hero is, and the person I've listened to probably most in my life is Billy Connolly, and so the accent to me is just such a lovely. I don't know. It's very nostalgic almost. We grew up watching Billy Connolly, so.
I think my mum has famously sat on his knee in an airport many moons ago.
Wow.
She'll be dining out on that one for a while.
So would I. I would love to sit on Billy Connolly's knee in an airport.
So I almost feel that you don't need an introduction, but I think many people listening to my podcast will be very familiar with your great work. You're a teacher, you're the founder and author of the Fabulous Resilience Project, which I want to talk about today. You're also the host of, I think, the Imperfects Podcast. And I want to talk a bit about podcasting. I think, you are a mental health and wellbeing advocate. I know that you're incredibly busy, and it's interesting. I was listening again. I've got the Resilience Project on Audible. I think I first listened to it when I was running, and I was just listening to the end part of it again yesterday. And you spoke about the kind of business model and side of things, but you said that and I suspect that's very much why you've given up your time today. Is that this is like my passion project. It is a passion, and that your view of wellbeing is that it should be collaborative and we need to work together if we're going to actually improve things. And I really appreciate you giving up your time, because I think, the more that we engage together and work together, that's how we make change. Totally. I'm also conscious going through this that the power of our personal stories and, the stories of those that we come in contact with do influence our own journeys. And I suspect you might speak to that. Now, just by way of introduction, I know you probably get asked this a lot and that you do a lot of speaking, and I would just love to hear from your perspective. Tell me about the Passion Project, tell me about the Resilience Project, and in essence, what it is in your raison d'etre.
Yeah, so it's a really great place to start, because I'm sure there are lots of people listening who, you've already brought up so many things I want to talk about, so I'm very excited about this chat. Just for context for people who have no idea who I am and what I'm talking about, or who and what I do, which is probably a lot of people. But I had a really, really, really. I think back to childhood, and I have the most. My mum never sat on Billy Connolly's knee, so it wasn't that good. But it was still. We had a wonderful childhood, full of the happiest, most incredible memories, and then, when my sister was 14 and I was 16, she was diagnosed with a mental illness, anorexia nervosa, and it ravaged her. And it also ravaged our family. And I remember very clearly having a moment when I was probably 16, 17, maybe 18 years old. I was sitting around the dinner table, and it was one of the nightly arguments around food with my mum and my sister and my dad. And I saw my dad in tears. And that's always seeing your parents crying is a heartbreaking. I feel like for a lot of people, you can remember all the times you saw your parents cry, because it doesn't.
Thinking of them now.
Yeah, it is such a confronting moment. And I remember having a moment when I was 17, 18. I remember thinking to myself, we're not a happy family anymore, and that's gone. And it was. And if I'm being really honest, as a 17, 18-year-old boy, I was kind of a bit angry at my sister, and I didn't quite understand. I didn't know what mental illness was. We weren't talking about mental illness in the 90s in schools. This is back in 97. We just weren't talking about it. And I didn't know what it was. I remember mum and dad saying, if she eats food again, she'll get better. And I remember thinking, that's not a proper illness. Like, I know, I've heard of people with cancer, and there's nothing they can do. You can't tell me that if all my sister has to do is eat food, this is And it wasn't until she was hospitalised when she was 18 years old that I properly understood the gravity of this horrific thing, mental illness, because she dropped to 31 kilograms. You know, she's 5'6", 5'7", and there was nothing. I was just devastating. But I remember, just to come back to my thought before, my thought was, we're no longer a happy family. And soon after that, I remember just wondering to myself, I became very fascinated with the question, what is it that makes people happy? Like what? And it wasn't because I thought I want to help my sister. I wanted to help my sister, but I knew that her condition was well beyond me as a 17, 18-year-old who'd only just learned what mental ill health was. But I did want to know what I could do to help mum and dad feel happier, and my little brother. And I did everything I could, like, to try and bring joy into. I think it's a bit of a thing maybe with the eldest, you sort of feel a bit of a responsibility. I mean, I think all the kids feel this kind of responsibility, but I certainly felt like it was my job to help everyone to feel happier. And so I didn't know how to, but I became fascinated with the question, what is it that makes everyone happy? So my interest in happiness, I suppose, or started at a very young age. And that's, my views on that have all changed now. I realize now you can't always be happy. You won't always be happy. It's a very unrealistic expectation of life. In fact, accepting that is a huge part of life. But back then I didn't know anything. I didn't know struggle. I didn't know heartache. I didn't know trauma. I didn't know any of that stuff. So for me, it was like, oh gosh, how do we just be happy? But and I didn't find an answer. And this is coming back to your question, Cheryl. Or do I call you doctor, or do I?
No.
No. Okay.
You can call me Shez. That's my Aussie name.
Shez, okay. Shez. Okay, Dr. Shez. So I didn't really find an answer to that stuff for another 10 years. And it was 10 years later, I was as a primary school teacher, and I was volunteering in a village in the far north of India. And a lot of people know this part of the story, but I was literally living in a village that I mean, I almost say quite literally had nothing, because there were no beds, there was no running water, there's the electricity. They couldn't afford to have electricity switched on, and people are sleeping on the floor. And I realized very quickly that never in my life had I ever before seen joy like this. I'd never experienced happiness like these people. And they had the clothes on their back, the shirt on their back, and then these tiny little mud huts, and they ate rice twice a day and vegetables in the morning for breakfast, and that's it. And I remember thinking, gosh, I think there's, and I was like,
stand out. I mean, I see this little boy who, I mean, it's a very powerful, image that you portray of him, but I can see how that made impacts. It was this kid. He was kind of like the poster boy of this village to me. Like, there's something about him which really drew me to him. But he was the one where I really just thought, I remember sitting in his class. It was my first class at him. I was thinking, who is this kid? And what is he doing that it just makes him so happy? Because I was looking out the hole in the mud brick and the mud brick wall, looking across the desert, thinking, there's nothing here. What is this kid so happy about? And then I realized it was kind of everyone. And that's kind of, I think that's actually kind of where the Resilience Project started, because I thought, and it wasn't about presenting it at schools and workplaces and sporting clubs across the country. Back then, it was just, I reckon I'm onto something here. This could be something that I could talk to my sister about, because she was still struggling back then, she would have been 24, 25 years old. And I remember thinking, I reckon there could be something in this. So that, I guess that's kind of how the Resilience Project started. I came back to Australia and went, right, I need to tell people this stuff. Fantastic. So I'm really interested then in the next part of the journey, because you've had these experiences, met these people, you have these stories, and you say that you love the storytelling, but you're also a teacher, and you started to incorporate some of these ideas into your classroom and working with your young pupils. But you are a teacher, and you did establish what became a more coherent framework for these ideas that you were having. So you talk about the GEM principles, which I'd love to go into. So can you tell me about the evolution of that? So this idea of the importance of gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness, which, will be terms that people listening to this podcast are very familiar with by now.
I think a few things happened to me when I was in India. First of all, for those of you who've spent time well, maybe it's not the fact I was overseas. I feel like, so I went over there with my ex-partner. She said she wanted to travel. I wanted to stay in Australia and just keep playing cricket because I love my cricket. And she said, no, we have to go and travel. And I was 28. I didn't want to. I was thinking, no, we need to be saving towards a house and we need to be, and she just wanted to travel. And I went with her. And for the first month, to be honest, I was quite miserable in India. I'd never been before. It was. I don't know if have you been to India before, Shiz? No. So it's really, really confronting. Like it's poverty. Like it's like in another planet. Like the attack of the senses when you first arrive, the smell and the sounds are just. It's so upsetting almost. Like, and the sights. Like I remember getting in and I haven't told this story before, but we got in a taxi we arrived at midnight in Mumbai, and we were I looked it up on Google Maps, and it said it was a 25-minute drive from the airport to where we were staying.
Yeah.
And we were accosted by that many people saying they'd take us to where we're, and I didn't know. I was saying, I'm pretty sure we've booked a car. And then this guy goes, yeah, it's my car. You booked my car. And then someone said, no, it's my car. And people literally grabbing our bags. One guy took off with my ex's bag to take it towards his taxi. And it was so stressful. People coming in, there was beggars coming from everywhere asking for money. And I was really quite stressed. And we ended up in this car that I couldn't sit upright in because the roof was so low. And so I had my head on an angle like this. Well, people can't listen to the podcast, can't see this, but I had my head on an angle to fit in the car. And there was the boot was full. So we had our huge backpacks on our laps and we were squashed into the back seat, and he took off into the night, and it was 30 degrees still, midnight. And it took us 2.5 hours to get to our hotel. It was meant to take 25 minutes just because of the traffic. At midnight was so bad. And every single time we stopped at the lights, the car was surrounded by beggars, people asking for money, people literally dangling their child into the car, like as if to say, look at my child, we need, these kids with no clothes on. And, people with I don't mean awful, but like confronting deformities or things that I hadn't seen before, burns. And I was so upset by that. I was so traumatized from that first 2.5 hours in India. I was really scared. I didn't know if the guy knew. He kept saying he knew he was going, but I didn't know if he knew. It was so foreign. It was dark, and that was kind of my experience for the first couple of months in India. It was just so confronting, so traumatic that I kind of felt like I'd reached this. I was trying to put on this stoic front that I was fine, I was loving it, and how exciting to travel. But I really battled. Like I was in a really bad place for the first time in my life. I was really challenged and really not coping well, and it led to this kind of, not a breakdown, but just, it was a low point for me. And I look back on that and I am so grateful for that, because it brought with it, and happens to a lot of us, which is, we don't realize at the time, we hate trauma, we hate challenging events, and we hate our struggles, but it brought about this humility that I didn't really have before. And that happens when you reach a low point in your life, when you reach a moment, you are flooded with this humility of like, I got to make some changes. Yeah. I need to change things. And it's a humility which is quite life-changing. And it's what led us to go and do this volunteer teaching. And that state of humility and just like, well, I'm open. Like I've been broken here. This country's broken me. I feel very open to whatever's coming my way. I have to accept that this is the way it is. So because of that, I think if I'd gone straight to volunteering, I may not have had this open mind, but I was at a pretty low point and I was incredibly lonely. I know I was there with my ex-partner, but I felt very lonely, not because of her. She was a wonderful person, but just being so far away from loved ones in such a difficult country. But this is a very long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, I think you're right. That it's so important that when we step out of our comfort zone and we end up in that space where we are very vulnerable, it is sink or swim, but we definitely learn every time.
Yeah, I mean, COVID has been horrific for so many reasons, but I do feel like it has brought people to their knees in this way that there's this humility where they go, I'm going to make changes. What I'm doing is not working. And it might be stuff that they were going to find out in 10, 15, 20 years' time. Like it could be stuff in people's relationships. Like being locked inside with one person, I think it was challenging for the best of relationships. And And I think it's forced a lot of people to make changes because of the humility that came with, I'm in such a bad place. What can I do to get better? I mean, I know you love your running, Cheryl, and I am obsessed with running as well. And I train down an athletics track about 5 minutes from my house. And it's usually, 5 or 6 people on the track. During COVID, the worst of us, there was like 30 or 40 people on there. And there's people you could tell they weren't runners. And they're still there now. Like, a year later, 10 months later, I still see those people there. And they look different. They've transformed their lives. And running's been a big part of that. And I'm not saying running's the answer. Well, having said that, I honestly feel like I could solve some people's problems with a pair of runners.
When you're preaching to the converted there. And I think that part of the power of the story is, I'm an avid sports fan as well. And I know that you're an athlete, former cricketer, runner, and you had a lot of interaction with athletes. I've certainly been lucky in the medical space to have that. And I'm very conscious my running community is very inclusive. A lot of us, that there's that community, we really connect. And, many of us actually came to running not necessarily because we wanted to be physically fit. We know what it does to our mental well-being. And I've got quite a few people in my community who've been very outspoken about their struggles with mental health. And it's a very inclusive, non-stigmatizing, non-judgmental space. I was kind of conscious that in my professional space, there's still quite a lot of stigma for doctors, for nurses, for carers. And I think I kind of wanted to harness a bit of that. And I like that you use the examples through sport and in the book. I wonder if you had any kind of commentary on the importance of, you've started to see sport in your life and your interactions with working with athletes or working in schools using sport.
Yeah.
Weigh in.
Gosh, I don't know where to start here. I mean, there's so much I could say about this. So there's a couple of things. I think one of the things that we are hardwired for as human beings, and one of the things that drives positive mental health and happiness and joy, is connection. And sporting clubs for me, I mean, I was brought up in a cricket club and a football club. Some of my happiest memories are from those sporting clubs. And I realized, for me as a kid, I wanted to play cricket for Australia. But when I was 22, 23, I realized that wasn't going to happen. But I didn't stop playing cricket. And I realized it wasn't because of the cricket. And when I stopped playing cricket, I didn't miss playing cricket. I missed having dinner with everyone after a game. I missed chatting to people in the changing rooms. I missed sitting down for the whole afternoon watching your teammates bat, but just being around other people for the day. And I missed and this is what you would get from your running group. And anyone who exercises a group will know this, but I missed the challenge of trying to do something which is very difficult as a group and then achieving it or not achieving it, like failing together or succeeding together, both just as powerful. I found our, your biggest losses. And there were so many, the other thing about sport, and I find there are so many metaphors for life, like I look back on some of our worst losses through cricket or whatever it was, and we became stronger because of that.
Making me think of my dad. My dad, we're a mad soccer family, and my dad thinks everything in life comes down to soccer. And he does have a metaphor, an analogy, and everything is soccer. Football. He calls it football, proper football.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I learned so much about life through my cricket club. I had an incredible cricket club, Melbourne University, where one of the things about Melbourne University, we play in the Premier League, so it's a good standard. But most of the people at Melbourne University Cricket Club have something much more important in their life, career-wise, or we have a couple of doctors, we have a surgeon, we have physios, accountants, lawyers, all types of all walks of life, and everyone's very focused on life away from sport. But I mean, I just learned so much about humility. About what connects us, the power of imperfection, like how what we bonded over was our imperfections, like the nicknames, the idiosyncrasies, the taking the piss out of people for their imperfections. That's what brings you closer. It's not, and that's people need to apply that to the outside world, but we don't. We feel like in a corporate setting, I mean, gosh, I do a lot of work in hospitals with doctors, and what I see is it's the opposite. It's just, I've got this. I'm in control. And it's this like, I don't have any flaws. I'm perfect. I'm not perfect, but like, and it's a very disconnecting way to be because we don't relate to that. We don't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to, just talking about resilience in general. I think there's so many negative connotations in my professional space for resilience because, I think, the people I work with, the nurses, the doctors, everybody in the caring space, and I think teachers as well are among some of the most resilient people that I know. And, the kind of implication is the problem is with us, when it's actually the culture, it's the system, it's the organizations we find ourselves in. And I mean, I'd be interested in your kind of commentary on that, because I think that what you're doing is actually, although this is called the Resilience Project, you're changing systems, you're changing cultures. And it takes all of us. And I know we do have to bolster ourselves in the interim while we're doing that. I just wonder if you have any advice for me as somebody who's navigating that space.
Well, the challenge is to get people to view vulnerability as a strength, because I think, especially in the medical profession, vulnerability, like the word vulnerable is like considered like a weak thing. But as far as human relationships and connection and, I mean, you're asking about sport before and sporting clubs. An example I can give you, which I think speaks to this, is in a very similar way in a sporting club, in the elite football clubs I work with, traditionally, you want to be seen as strong and tough and unbreakable, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you want your opposition to see you as that, but that doesn't work from a mental health point of view. It doesn't work. So I was working with a wonderful football club called the Port Adelaide Football Club, and their biggest, strongest, toughest player, named Charlie, was in a really bad place from a mental health point of view. Last or 2 seasons ago, it was in a shocking place, and he hadn't told anyone. And he told me what he was battling with, stuff with depression and anxiety, and he was in a really bad place. And I said, "Have you told your teammates this?" And he said, "No." And I said, "How come?" And he said, "I because I'm meant to be like the tough, strong." He's covered in tattoos, and he said, "They'll just think it's weak." And I said, "If one of your teammates said to you, 'I'm battling with depression,' would you think that was weak?" And he said, "No, I think it was actually quite courageous." And I said, "Well, I don't know. Why is it different for you?" And he thought about it for a bit, and we worked together to develop a platform for him to actually get up and speak to the playing group. And at the start of last season, he told the players what he was going through, his mental health. He told them how bad it was, how perilous his mental health was. And I've still never seen anything like in a sporting club, but the love and support. He got hugged by 44 men. Like, they all hugged him, told him how much they loved him, how special he was. He had his best year he's ever had last year by a mile. And it's because he could stop pretending that everything was okay, and he could just turn up to the football club and be himself, be imperfect, struggle like the rest of us, not put on this mask. And I think so many people, just traditionally alpha males in particular, my mentor is a guy called Ben Crow, and Ben tells me he's done a lot of work with banks after the Royal Commission. And he said, there is this whole generation of 50 plus alpha males who have woken up and just gone, what has happened for the last 20 years of my life? Yeah, I'm very rich and very successful, but like, what I've been like, they've just kind of woken up to the fact that the way they're living their life, it has not been sustainable. Yeah, I'm rich and yeah, I'm successful. I'm not happy. I am not happy. And I kind of feel like the energy it takes to pretend that you're okay is crippling in the end. Like, we need to get better at just saying, I'm not good at the moment. This is why. I just need a bit of a hand to get through this. It takes a pretty strange person to go, no, sorry. I want you to be tough. Don't bring that in here. Like, but there are so many industries, and I feel like, from what I've seen in hospitals, for doctors, doctors' job is to fix everyone else, make everyone else okay. So I guess doctors feel like, well, I can't not be okay because my job is to make everyone else okay. You watch how relatable it is to be able to say to someone, yeah, I'm not okay, but I'm doing my best. Yeah. I am trying so hard here. And that's what I think is, that kind of attitude and behavior is really healthy.
I'm wearing my emotional female badge today. One of my colleagues has written a book about her own mental health struggles and a really bad burnout experience, Yumiko Kadota. It's a really powerful book, and I think we're all reading it, and it really speaks to us. And I'm glad that I got my pin for a book, so I'm wearing that proudly today. I mean, there's quite a few things that I wanted to pick up. I was thinking about the podcast. I don't want to move on to that, but I think, when you have people that we see in the media, athletes and musicians and artists, really who you think have it all together and who are living perfect lives, be very vulnerable for you. And I'm very, conscious of the great privilege to interview someone on a podcast who will take their time and be vulnerable for you. It's really powerful for the rest of us, because it gives us, it opens the door. It does break down barriers. So I want to thank you for doing that. I just wanted to go into the GEM principles a little bit. I think, particularly empathy, really interested kind of in your commentary there. I think that teachers, doctors, nurses, carers are some of the most empathic people that I know. This idea of feeling with people, I think, actually makes us good at our job. But I'm also, I'm conscious, and we have to put a kind of COVID slant on this. The toll of the last year for everyone has been incredible, but particularly for our carers. And I think that the very thing that makes us good at what we do with our patients and connecting can also leave us vulnerable to, certainly more to burnout and vicarious trauma and onboarding. And I find just how we navigate that is, and again, it's probably like you say, being vulnerable and being willing to share and creating safe communities. I don't know if you've got any commentary from the teaching space.
I think about this a lot, because, as I said, I've done a lot of stuff with doctors and nurses, and empathy being when you feel what someone else feels and how powerful that is. But then the flip side of that is that in doing that, you are constantly feeling everyone else's pain. You're taking a lot of pain. So it's like this, it's a fine line, I think, for people who do what you do. But I think you need to be aware, though, if you're going to, sorry.
I've got my water today.
So I think you need to be aware that if you are going to try and numb your empathy side of things, like try and turn down that part of you that goes, I'm not going to feel what that person feels, it's going to be too painful for me right now. You can't just turn that down and not dial down the part that experiences the positive emotions as well. Absolutely. Like you'll start to, you won't experience the emotional highs of, having an incredible, a patient get through some remarkable recovery that you were responsible for. You're the reason they're living. You're the reason that someone's still got a mum or a dad or a brother or a sister. You can numb that side that hurts, but you also numb that as well. And I feel like in doing that, you're depriving yourself of some pretty extraordinary connections in life. So I don't know what the answer is, because having not worked in that area, I don't feel qualified to comment there. But I do know that the effect of numbing the negative emotion will also be numbing. You can't have one and not the other.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've said before that I think it's a great privilege to bear witness to the full spectrum of the human experience. But I think you're right. Part of it is probably being able to show our own vulnerability and see that as a strength. So I wanted to move on to mindfulness. Obviously, the title of this podcast is Mindful, which is meant to be a playful take on that. Because, John Kabat-Zinn obviously has this very eloquent definition of mindfulness that, we're in the moment, we're paying attention on purpose, without any judgments. I actually think that is very, very hard. I think you'll agree.
Totally.
Guys are busy and in our heads all of the time. When you're out there and you're working with groups and communities, what's your working definition of mindfulness, and how do you kind of transmit the message of how we can be more mindful in the present moment?
It's the one out of the three, gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. When I say it, it's the one that occasionally will get a bit of an eye roll from people going, yeah, I get it, I should do meditation or whatever. But I don't really talk about it from the point of doing meditation. That's a great way to practice mindfulness. But the research says we spend 49% of our day thinking about the future and 34% of our day thinking about the past. So that gives us 15% of our life, or approximately 15% of our life, where we're actually thinking about what's happening as it's happening. And I think that's really sad when you consider that 100% of our life is the present moment, but we're only showing up for 15% of it. And I'm not saying you should never reflect on the past and plan for the future, but I think 50% of our day thinking about the future, that's a lot. And here's the other thing that I think causes a lot of the issues we have in the world right now around with our levels of anxiety is that we can't control the past. And we're spending a third of our day thinking about it. I think that's very anxiety provoking. Well, it is by very definition. Worrying about something you cannot control is very anxiety provoking. I mean, we spend way too much time worrying about things we can't control. One of the great, the Buddhist philosophy around you should only ever live in one of three states: acceptance, enjoyment, or enthusiasm. And I think so many of us spend our time worrying about stuff we can't control rather than accepting it. And the very act of accepting it, I mean, my mentor, Ben Crow, says this to me. He said, you either accept or you suffer. It is as simple as that. And that's very Buddhist kind of mentality, but it's very true. So to come back to mindfulness, we spend half our day thinking about the future. We have very little control over the future at any given moment. So that kind of, that's very, very anxiety provoking as well. The only thing you ever have control over in your life is what is happening right now in this moment. And we're devoting 15% of our energy towards that. I think that's a great upside for anyone to just go, I could dedicate more time to being wherever I am. That's huge. But it's one thing to realize it, but then you need to practice as well. You can't just, end this podcast and go, yeah, okay, I'll be more mindful. You got to practice. And yes, meditation is an incredible way to do it. It's the purest way to practice mindfulness, but it might be something like going for a walk for 15 minutes during your day and paying attention to what you can hear. And that's it. The birds, the wind, your footsteps, cars, trucks driving past. And what will happen is inevitably 5 minutes in, or not 5 minutes, 30 seconds in, you'll start thinking about what you're having for dinner, or a meeting you've got later in the day, or an issue you've got in your relationship that took place the day before. Just catch yourself thinking about it and go, oh, that's not what I can hear. What can I hear? And then come back to what you can hear. It is amazing how often our brain just wants to wander to plan for the future's thoughts from our past. It happens constantly, but if we spend 15 minutes a day practicing catching our brain doing that and bringing it back, we get better. So we're not bad people. Everyone knows what this feels like. That's sitting around the dinner table with your loved ones, and you realize 5 minutes later you haven't listened to what anyone said because you're thinking about an issue you've got to deal with the next day or something that happened during the day. Again, we're not bad people. We just find it really hard to just be wherever we are. And I think COVID again has probably, just has shone a light on, to me, that we need to slow down and just connect with what really matters in life. And I think for a lot of us, that's a certain group of people that really matter to us. And so the next time we're with them, just be there with them. Don't think about who else is here that I could talk to, or what's happening on my phone, or I've got that meeting tomorrow. Just be there with those people. Because we didn't realize this, but I think we're taking I think COVID has really shone a light on, we were taking so much for granted, and we were taking people for granted. I was taking my parents for granted. I'm very happy to admit that and say that. I'm embarrassed to say, I'm a bit ashamed to say it, but I was taking my parents for granted, and mum and dad would come over to look after the kids, and I'd go, thanks for that, thanks very much. And then they'd sort of go, or if they'd hung around, I'd go, yep, cool, no worries. Well, and I wouldn't really, I saw my parents on the weekend, and I just sat there, and Dad tells long stories that I've heard 1,000 times before. And he launched into one of his stories, and I just sat there and thought, how good is this? How lucky am I to hear this story? Because, a year ago I'd go, oh God, not this story again. But I realized during COVID, there was a point during COVID where I actually thought to myself, oh, I'd give anything to be listening to one of his dad's stories right now. But then I had another moment about half an hour later, and I was like, I am so bloody glad I've had that realization now when Dad's still alive. Because the next time I listen to his story, I will probably listen to it for the 50th time. And that's what happened on the weekend. And I think I think a lot of our issues come back to the fact that we are not properly present. And it's not our fault. Again, we're not bad people. There are so many things fighting for our attention at the moment. Our devices are constantly buzzing and vibrating and ringing and taking us away from the present moment with stuff that's addictive. And we're addicted. We're the most addicted generation or group of people in the history of the world. Again, not our fault. There's a lot going on around us, but we got to put that away and just be wherever we are.
Just making me think of my family. It's the first year time in 12 years my parents haven't been able to be in Australia at this time of year, and I think it's been about 14 months since I saw mum and dad, and my brother's in the Middle East and I can't wait to hug them. But thank goodness albeit this is artificial and I can't hug them, but thank goodness for this media. We wouldn't have had this, 15 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to connect and actually see them.
That's a seamless transition to gratitude. Like that's, I think, and the third thing we talk about, gratitude. Like you've just segued to it so beautifully because we, we're taking so much for granted, and a lot of people in lockdown. Yeah, it was really hard, but gratitude gives you perspective as well. And people said, "Oh, it's so unprecedented." It's not unprecedented. 1919 maybe, the world went through the same thing with the Spanish flu. Everyone went into lockdown, and we lost a lot more lives. But no one was connecting via FaceTime. There was no Skype, no FaceTime, no Zoom. When they said they couldn't see their loved ones, they couldn't see anyone. We can still see our loved ones. We can still talk to them. I know it's a little awry. It's not quite right. And it's not, the timing's a bit off and you don't quite get the same thing. But gosh, you put it in perspective, we're unbelievably lucky.
No, I agree. You throughout the book, certainly on the website and in the podcast, you give us some of the hard data surrounding our challenges that we face. And I know that COVID is, it makes me fearful for other waves of mental ill health that we'll see through our lifetime. Yeah. You talk about 1 in 5 Australians will experience mental ill health. I think you said 1 in 4 adolescents, which is terrifying, and 1 in 7 primary school children. As I say, the loss of connection and the kind of hardship of this year does make me, we are seeing this in my professional space, and it makes me worried for the future. I know there's some really fantastic work happening, and we've got, because we were given a spotlight with COVID, we've got the Mental Health Commission here in Australia and the great work of psychiatrists like Professor McGorry, many others, so many independent initiatives, particularly focusing on prevention. I'll relink the great resources that I have in previous episodes: the Black Dog Institute, Beyond Blue, Lifeline, we've got Are You OK Day, prevention and awareness. And, I'm seeing some great initiatives within my own profession. We've got the great work of Dr. Jeff Toogood, who founded Crazy Socks for Docs. I had Drs. Tanny Bridson and Kim Jenkins, two psychiatrists in Melbourne, talking about their work with peer support. That was an initiative that, came out of thin air from 2 passionate individuals this year. So, and through this podcast, I've come into contact with some really fantastic people doing, incredible things. And I think I agree that collaboration moving forward is definitely the way to progress. The Resilience Project is now rolled out across schools and workplaces. Do you have a vision of where you'd like to see the project go in the next couple of years?
Well, I've got some more statistics for you, which the other statistics we have on our website. But we partner with a group called Resilient Youth Australia, and they've surveyed 320,000 kids around the country in the last 3 years. And their statistics now, they are properly frightening. According to them, we've got 40% of secondary school kids in Australia with a mental illness now. And the one that I find more confronting is we've got 24% of primary school kids in Australia with a mental illness. Now, I think back to grade 3, 4, 5, and 6, and to me, I can't fathom 5, 6 kids in every class having a mental illness. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't imagine what would make me so feel that way in that age. So we're also, some other statistics for you, we're also Australians are amongst the loneliest people in the world. There's a survey conducted a few years ago which asked the question, how many people know you well? And it was countries all over the world. Australia is one of them. How many people know you well? And how many people can you turn to in a crisis? And Australians ranked right up there as the loneliest people in the world. We don't feel like many people know us well. We don't feel like we have many people we can turn to in a crisis compared to other countries. What else? We're the second most medicated country in the world for anxiety disorder. Some of this stuff is... so yes, it's a great country for many reasons. And please don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful to be an Australian, but there are a lot of things we're doing wrong right now. And what you say about everyone collaborating when I come across way too many people in this industry who feel like it's a competition, like they've got to, why is that person talking about this? They're not qualified to do this, or they're not qualified. It's not working. What's happening at the moment? It's just not working. And not to say the people who are doing the work, that, psychologists, incredible, but they can see 8-9 people a day. So we've got to think of as many ways as possible to expose people to this stuff. And what I hope the Resilience Project, looking at those statistics, we're chatting to federal government at the moment about some kind of potential way of rolling out our program we have spent, this is a long way of answering your question, but we've spent the last 2 or 3 years preparing for that question you just asked there, which is, there's myself and there's a few other presenters. There's 4 or 5 of us who presented the Resilience Project, but we're limited by geography. We can only get to a certain amount of schools and workplaces every year. So a while ago, people were saying, "Oh, why don't you put your stuff online? Then you can speak to as many people as possible." And I kept saying, no, because for this stuff to work, we've got to give them a 9 or 10 out of 10 experience, and it just doesn't work online. But we actually have employed for me, the best people in the country as far as film production, TV production, to take our content and put it online into a really entertaining way. So Josh van Cuylenburg, who is also my brother, is an incredible videographer and producer. And we've teamed him up with Ryan Shelton and Tim Bartley, who are the other half of Hamish and Andy, to help us create this product, which any school around the country can just click a button and they've got all our content. They can get all our curriculum. And we're working with the federal government to go, well, how do we get that to as many schools as possible, and how's the best way to do that? So my hope, the Resilience Project, and I shouldn't say the Resilience Project, for any mental health, any good mental health programs, the other thing I'd say is I think it is important to have some kind of evidence-based.
Absolutely.
So we Melbourne University just finished their 3-year evaluation of our program, rigorous. Making sure that what we're doing is, first of all, not causing harm is a really important thing. Anyone in the industry knows that, but also then what are we actually doing that's working, and so how do we replicate that across the country? So I say that because I'm not saying it has to be the Resilience Project. It's who gets into all the schools, as long as it's someone's mental health program, and as long as it's evidence-based, then yeah. But my hope is that we can reach every. I know it sounds silly, but I want to reach every kid in the country, because this stuff is. You said before, we don't know what the fallout is from COVID, and I shudder to think. I don't even look at my next door neighbours, the kids next door. That they seem very different to me than they were this time last year. The impact of being stuck at home for a year, they seem to be quite different. And from what the schools we work with, they're saying the kids are very different to what they were this time last year. So this stuff has never been more important. But it's like what we spoke about at the start. This breakdown we've had, this low point that we've had, it's a catalyst to create change. There's a beautiful song of a group called, I don't know if it's Frou Frou or Frau Frau. I've never known. I think it's Frou Frou. But the line in the song is let go, just jump in. There's beauty in a breakdown. And that to me is, I think this has kind of been our breakdown as a community, as a society, to go, we're completely broken. We're at our knees. Let's make some really significant changes. I'm taking a long time to answer all your questions.
No.
It's because they're good questions that just have so many different talking points. But I guess what I'm trying to say is my hope for the Resilience Project is that we're in every school in Australia, but it doesn't have to be our program. I hope some really good program is in every school in Australia, because kids need this. And I hope that, we'll look back on COVID and go, it was awful, but if it wasn't for COVID, we wouldn't be teaching mental health to every single kid in the country. So
This is true. And, you know, when you said catalyst, I think I've seen really positive things. I've seen what we can do in crisis. And I agree, this is an exciting time in that respect. And I just, you know, because this, just on the topic of passion projects, because I'm aware that this has grown arms and legs and wings, and you have a great team now, but this started with you. It started with an individual with, you know, on a mission, you know, driving up and down the country, saying yes to everything. And, you know, I'm, you know, which I think is fantastic, but there must have been times where you're thinking, oh, geez. So do you have any advice for people who are, you know, working on their own initiatives or their own passion projects to encourage them to keep going?
Gosh, I mean, I get asked this, not so much I get asked, I just think about this a lot. I was thinking about it on Saturday morning because I was at a cafe with my son in Hawthorne in Melbourne, and it's the same cafe I used to go to 10 years ago when I was trying to start the Resilience Project and start to get it going. And it's the same cafe that one day I actually couldn't afford a coffee in because I had no money. Like I was done. Like I'd run out of all the savings I had from teaching, and teachers will know that you don't get much savings as a teacher. I remember at that point thinking, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think I need to stop and I kept saying to myself, get a real job. But I mean, what kept me going? There's a couple of things that kept me going. The main one was the absolute thrill I got from whenever I did get the opportunity to present to a group of kids. Just this feeling I had in me of like, oh my God, that is the best feeling. Like doing those presentations, and it wasn't, and there is a point to this, and there's an important message in this. It wasn't so much the content and the mental health stuff. It was just, I was doing what I love doing more than anything in the world, which is public speaking. So I think if you can combine, this is the advice bit, I suppose, if you can combine your passion with something you bloody love doing, it's not as hard to stick at it when times are really tough. So, you know, I remember a trip I had from, my philosophy was say yes to everyone for the first few years, and it's going to take you to some pretty difficult places, and it's going to be pretty hard work, but just be grateful that you are doing the work. And I remember one day there was a primary school in Melbourne said, can you speak in the morning? You speak one morning and then we need you to speak the next morning as well. They're the only times we've got available. And I went, oh, okay, bit of an issue. I'm just speaking at a parent night in Portland, which is a 5-hour drive. And I went, they pretty much said, well, it's not our problem. That's your problem if you want to speak at the school.
A long drive.
And so it was I finished at midday at this primary school, then drove 5.5 hours to Portland, and I didn't have time for lunch or to even stop because I had to get there for this parent night in Portland. Spoke at the parent night and hung around, spoke to everyone in the car park afterwards, everyone asking these questions, and it went reasonably well. And I left at 9:30 at night, and I hadn't eaten, and I felt so. Here's the thing, that I felt so filled up and energized from this talk that I'd just given to the parents because it just went so well. And I was like, I just love that so much. But then it was a 5-hour, 6-hour drive because I stopped for food. So I got home around 3:34 in the morning. And then I was at the school in Melbourne the next morning at like 8:30 on 2 or 3 hours sleep. And it was so grueling, but I loved what I was doing so much that, you know, it's this challenge to go, well, what do I love doing and what's my passion? It's not so much what I love doing, what am I good at? And there's a lot of things in the world I'm not good at, but I think I'm okay at public speaking. So my passion is mental health. I think I'm good at public speaking, and I get it lights me up, public speaking. So there were times when it was challenging to go, well, why am I doing this? People don't want to hear me speak. But then when I did get the opportunity to do it, I was like, that's why I'm doing it. The thrill I get from this is, and that's changed for me now. It's funny, like I've been doing it for 10 years now, and I think we'd worked out, I think I've done over 3,700 talks I've given in the last sort of 10 years. And it has changed for me now. What really lights me up is this kind of thing, like a podcast where you can do this one talk and it can reach as many people, or it can reach, you don't even know, like, you know, you don't know who it's going to reach. And this is the thing that I'm sure you've found, Cheryl, with your podcast, is like, it's a funny thing. You put it out there, you release it, and you actually don't know. You know, when you speak face to face, you can go, oh, that's hit that person. It's definitely reached that person. But you don't know who's like you will have helped so many people, Cheryl, and you'll never know. Like you actually, it's a strange feeling.
I mean, that's a perfect segue as well, right into, because I do want to talk about, I mean, obviously this is my passion project, and I do think podcasting is a powerful medium. I know that you actually said when you launched the Imperfects podcast, and if people listening haven't listened to the Imperfects podcast, they have to get on it. I mean, I think just the combination of, yourself and Ryan, I like the humanity and good humor, dealing with really, very serious subject matter. But I need do you think Ryan would come on my podcast?
He definitely will. He definitely will. I
need a sidekick. No, I'm just going to poach him. I was saying
it's very powerful having Ryan Shelton sit next to you in a podcast. I can tell you
absolutely. But so now I've gone off on a tangent. But I do think it is a powerful medium. But you were quite reluctant. I think you felt that there was a lot of podcasts out there, you said, and to do something a bit different. And I do think that you have achieved that. I'd love to hear, so what was the eventual kind of motivation, impetus for the Imperfects podcast?
It was Ryan. He was the reason that because I think after every talk I did, someone would say, where's your podcast, or where do I find your podcast? And I'd say, I don't have one. And we go, why don't you have one? Like your job's speaking. Surely that would, we have to say, well, I feel like there's so many great podcasts out there already with these conversations. I don't think I've got anything to add. It also may have been more of a time issue, but anyway, there's a couple of things. It was, I just feel like also at my heart of hearts, and it probably speaks to my insecurities as a human being, I'm always surprised people want to listen to me speak. And so there's always this part of like, I always rush through my talks because I feel like, these people got something better to do. They don't want to listen to this, or this has gone on too long. So I feel like I've also been a bit insecure of like, I'm sure people want to listen to the podcast. But when I met Ryan, when I became friends with Ryan and our friendship started to take shape, I remember thinking, well, my mission in life is to reach as many people as possible and to help as many people be happier as possible, to experience happiness. And I thought, I reckon doing this with Ryan and I were having these conversations. Ryan and I would catch up we live about probably 10, 15 minutes away, and we have this mutual love of cafes and restaurants and pubs. And Ryan lives in Fitzroy and I used to live in Fitzroy. So we had our favorite places. So we would catch up and we'd just become friends, age 38, 39, or 37, I was 37, I was 38. And we were catching up, and it was like this new friendship. I was like, this is weird. You don't make really good new friendships at this age. But the conversations we were having, I was in the car driving home. There was this conversation we had where Ryan was in tears and we had a massive hug afterwards. And I was in the car on the way home thinking, oh my gosh, I wish people could hear that conversation. That would have helped so many people, that conversation. That's the thought I had in the car. And I'm lying in bed that night, I'm still thinking about it. And I thought, well, there is a way we can have these conversations and people can hear them. We could do a podcast together. And I called him the next day. No, I messaged him that night at 11:30 at night and said, I should put more thought into this message, but I just run on this by, I think we should do a podcast together. And he wrote back, he was still up, and he said, well, I think you should do a podcast. I'll help produce it, but I don't need to be on it. And I wrote back and was furious, like it should have been a phone call, but we were texting because it was so late. I said, no, but you being in it's so powerful because your personality will be so disarming and make it so accessible. And he was saying, no. I'm not qualified to have these conversations, but I'll help you create it. And it honestly, Cheryl, it took me 6 months of myself and his beautiful partner, Jam, to convince him that he should be on it. And you can still sense early on in the podcast, there's this, you can sense that he's not sure if he should be there or not. But what he does is, I mean, the people that listen to our podcast that would never ordinarily listen to a podcast on mental health or wellbeing, he has made this stuff by being
accessible.
Just by being himself, he has opened this discussion to so many people who wouldn't. And I get messages from people all the time saying, I wouldn't usually listen to this kind of stuff, or I wouldn't use, but Ryan is just so funny. I just can't miss an episode because he just makes me laugh so much. But the thing is that Ryan doesn't give himself credit for, or maybe he hasn't realized yet, he has this beautiful knack he is very qualified to talk about this stuff because he gets it. He's a deeply empathetic, insightful and caring person. And he is, the moments that he's brought out in these podcasts where, the humor is great and it's one of a kind and no one else can do it like he does it. But he also has this beautiful knack of being very vulnerable himself.
I mean, I want to thank you both for the great work. I mean, I think there's so many standout episodes for me. And I think, I mean, your wife, Penny, is incredible. And, her episode is one of my favorites. And then I just listened to Rick Davies the other day.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, but, he said, as he said, you are changing lives. You are all changing lives by doing this. And so many powerful conversations, just breaking down barriers. And, I think it's a wee bit cathartic, actually. And the other episode that really spoke to me, and I'm probably as nervous approaching this interview as you were, when you said you don't get nervous public speaking, but you did say you were nervous interviewing Missy Higgins. And I'm a huge Missy Higgins fan. And, I knew a bit of her story, and I remember when I was probably at the peak of my kind of training, and, I was really quite jaded and going into another night shift, and I had Old Razzle Dazzle on repeat. And I think she's got a song called Everyone's Waiting. And we talk about the power of music on my podcast, and you've already spoken to that today. And, she won't know the impact that album had on me, and her story has had on me. I love this, the way she was able to share that. People don't realize at the peak of her power, as she said, she was struggling. And so I think there's so much power in that. So I'm really excited to see where that's going to go. I really like that you also share your podcast funnies and fails. So do you have any favorite? Because I think I made every mistake and error, and every time I do this, I learn a new thing that I should have done. Any advice for me for podcasting? Any favorite episodes, funnies, fails that you could share?
As in other people's podcasts that I listen to?
Your podcast, when you've been in the process of making it.
Oh gosh, there's so many. Every episode has these. What have I got for you? Well, I mean, the Missy one was Missy was the first one that we'd ever done. And I remember going to Missy Higgins concert when I was 27, I reckon, 28 at the Rod Laver Arena. And I was there with my ex-partner.
We are the same age, so yeah.
There you go. Okay, so we have very similar life experiences then.
We do, and I was in Melbourne. I did all my training there, so yeah.
There you go. Okay, we've probably met somewhere. We've probably bumped into each other. We've been at the same pub at some time. I remember watching Missy Higgins perform, and I was thinking, I am so in love with this person. And I was there with my partner at the time, and I was like, I love Missy Higgins. So she's just, for me, like so perfect, and then have always been such a huge fan. I mean, I didn't say this to her because I didn't want to come across like I was sort of too fangirling too hard. But the song, I mean, all her albums, all the songs, but when Steer came out, that came out and I know you speak about, I listened to your episode when you had, I've forgotten her name, which is so bad.
Oh, Christine Barker.
Yes, there you go. I listened, it was a beautiful episode.
Moore. She actually recently won an award, so I'm quite excited for her.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm not surprised. She's very good.
Wow.
I was listening to, The Power of Music, I was, just the lyrics of Steer, when you finally realize that you can steer and you have control in your life of certain things, that often things, so that had such a big impact on me. And so Missy Higgins came into the studio and I was playing it really cool. And I thought, no, I feel good here. I think I'm good. I think I'm relaxed here. And I asked my first question. She started talking, and I went back to that, like, in love 27-year-old. I was like, oh God, oh no, this is not, I was just like, you are so wonderful. And, the other thing that's happened with this podcast, and it speaks to the power of vulnerability, but Ryan and I have become really good friends with a lot of the people who've had on our podcast. Like I was at Missy's house on Sunday with her. I get on really well with her husband, and our kids get on really well. And we spent the morning at her place, and we're in the car on the way back. And Penny said, "It's so strange how we're really good friends with Missy Higgins now." And she said, from one podcast, and I said, "Yeah, but that's kind of what happens, is it? If you are vulnerable with someone, it just opens yourself up to these friendships." So, Penny and Rick Davies, for those of you who haven't listened to our podcast, Rick Davies is Jimmy from Offspring, someone else who, I speak about being in love with Missy. I'm pretty sure.
I recently listened to Asher Kerry on Julie Giller's podcast of One His Own. So that's two of my, there's another podcast.
Yeah, totally. Well, Penny, like any female, I think had a very big thing for Jimmy, but So Rick Davies sent Penny an inbox message, a DM, and just said, "Hey, that I've just listened to your episode on OCD, and I cried the whole way through. I have OCD as well. You're my hero. I cannot believe you just said what you said." And so he came on and he did his episode off the back of that. And they're now, they had lunch the other day, and we're catching up with them for dinner with his partner as well in a couple of weeks. And it's just this connection that comes through vulnerability. Like, here's Penny, who would say to herself, who says to people, "Oh, I'm not a famous person. I'm a no one." When we said you should do an episode, she's like, "I'm not famous. I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous."
You're right.
Yeah. But then she does that, inspires Jimmy to do his episode. They become really good friends. We've been inundated with people saying, "I didn't know what OCD was. I've realized that's what I've got. I'm not crazy. I've got OCD." It's all come from these really vulnerable conversations. It's connected so many people. It's started these friendships, I love all the episodes we've done. I'm so proud of everyone who has done it. I love the people that we've had the privilege of chatting to. I'm actually finding it really hard to think of. I mean, the irony of our podcast is that it's called the Imperfects, but we put so much work in the post edit. It's not. Then this is Ryan's. He's a perfectionist, and with everything he creates, with Hamish and Andy, their shows take a year to work on. They do a show, it takes them a whole year to 6 months to produce it or whatever. He does apply the same thing to our podcast, whereas I'm like, let's just record and put it out there. And he says, no, that's not how we're doing this. We need to. So, there's an episode coming out today. It's a new format we've got where I don't know if you've heard it yet.
I've already got it. Yeah, it's dropped. I've listened to the first bit. I didn't have enough time before this.
Yeah, well, I'm
looking
feeling
forward to it.
I'm feeling very nervous about it because
wonder what the plan is.
It's you'll find out very soon. I find it very hard to choose a favorite, but they're all very memorable for different reasons. But I think I'm very proud of Penny for what she's done. And it helped us. Like, funnily enough, it helped our relationship. It was so good for our relationship. I know this time, Penny, but we talked about it on our podcast, what she was going through, and it really helped us. So
thank you. I mean, I'm very conscious that I don't want to take all of your time here. I've just got a couple of, I do have some closing questions, but just before I do that, so two things. Obviously the Resilience Project is in a book, and I'm going to put all the links to the Audible and the other book, but do you have any current book that you're reading or any recommendations? Because we do have a kind of growing Mindful Medic podcast book list. Is there anything that's been a standout for you lately?
Well, what I'm reading right now, there's two things I'm reading right now. One is The Man Who Couldn't Stop, and that is on OCD. And I'm just reading it. I have read it before, and I'm reading it again because it always reminds me of what my wife goes through every single day, and that when she's not present, and this goes for any mental illness, when she's not present, when she's trying to deal with an obsessive thought or an intrusive thought, it's not personal. It doesn't mean she doesn't love me. It doesn't mean she doesn't want to be with me. She's just dealing with something which is, I don't understand. So that's the same with, I think, depression, anxiety as well. So I'm reading that. I am rereading at the moment because I've started work on my second book, which is coming out hopefully before the end of the year. There's a bit of a scoop. I haven't said that out. There's a bit of a scoop for you, but I haven't said that out loud before. But I'm rereading an incredible book called Love 2.0, which is by Barbara Fredrickson.
I've heard of that. I haven't read it. Right.
Yeah. So basically the tenet there is, and you'd know much more about this, but the whole thing she talks about the vagus nerve or the vagal nerve connecting the brain to the heart. And again, you'd know so much more about this than I, but what they've found is that the way to strengthen that and the role of that is to regulate your body's response to, like a fight or flight, or it sort of flushes out adrenaline and cortisol when you're really confronted or something, a crisis takes place or you're challenged by something. And what they've found is the way to strengthen vagal tone is to experience the emotion of love, the oxytocin. So, and the way that you do that is through, and love doesn't mean being in a long-term relationship. It actually means love. Barbara, she defines it as a micro moment of positive resonance. You don't have to be married to have that. You could see a sunset and go, oh, I love that. Or it could be the feeling at the end of a run where you just go, I've achieved something. I just feel so good about myself. Or it could be My sister-in-law tells a great story, which is explains this. She was during lockdown. She said she was walking along the river. She had her mask on. She had her child, Charlie, who was 6 months old at the time, strapped to her chest, and they walked past an old man. She said he was about 90, 95. He had his mask on. And as they walked past each other, he held up a little sign, and the sign said, "I'm smiling." It's a beautiful story, isn't it? But she cried when she told me that story. That's not a sadness. That was like a micro moment of positive resonance. It was such a moment of love between two strangers. The more moments like that we have, the better our vagal tone, the better our mental health effectively. So that's Love Point 2.0, which I'm reading as well.
Great. And yeah, you've answered. So there is going to be a sequel to the Resilience Project, which is great.
Yes. And the theme will be around imperfection, vulnerability, passion, purpose, all that kind of stuff.
Perfect. And the tour, you are going to be going on tour soon, and you're coming to Hobart. And I am very disappointed to say I went to book my tickets last night and it's sold out. So it's great.
I will get you a ticket. There's always some on hold. I'll get you a ticket.
But where are you going to be? So you're going to be coming here, which is great. You're going all over Melbourne. You'll be going to every state?
Yeah, every state. So we've done this national tour. We've called it a national tour the last 2 years, but we didn't go to Tassie, we didn't go to Perth. And I've been told in no uncertain terms that is not a national tour. So we are going everywhere this year, from all the major cities across the country. I say that, but I'm not sure about Darwin. I have to check the schedule, but plus many regional. So I think in Tassie we'll be going to Launceston and Hobart. In Victoria, there are a lot of regional places as well as Melbourne, but then Sydney, Newcastle, Canberra, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Perth, amongst many others. There's about probably 30 different locations around the country. So, and I hate saying this, it makes it sound like a sales trick, but I think a lot of venues are selling out very quickly. So you'll have to jump online and get that now.
You know what the tour is about, just for people listening.
Their stories, they're my favourite stories from my life that are either funny, hopefully very funny, or emotionally engaging. And the whole point is just let's prioritise our mental health because we need to.
Bring people together. I mean, again, it's still communities. It's making connection.
Yeah, totally.
Just before I go into the final question, is there anything else that I know you've been asked, you've done so many of these and you've been asked many, many things. Is there anything else that we haven't maybe discussed today that you think is important?
Yeah, I need to be more like that. That's such a great way to end it, because I always finish my podcast interviews and then I'll start talking about something after the interview that's really good. And I go, oh, shit, we should have talked about that.
That's where the gold is. The gold happens after the close. Totally.
It's so true. My brother Josh always says, leave the microphones on, because people speak a lot more naturally. But I think if I could summarize what I think the biggest issue is at the moment, and this comes from a lot of work I've done with my mentor, Ben Crow, who I've mentioned a few times. But I think deep down, a lot of us don't feel like we're worthy of love and belonging kind of as we are. We have this great fear that we're not enough. And so we try to feel like if I make this amount of money, then I'll be accepted, or if I get this job, or if I have this many friends, or if there's this many followers on social media, or if, we kind of feel like I'm not good looking enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not. And I think we all need to realize that as we are right now, we're enough. Like we are worthy of, by being born, we are worthy of love, and we are worthy of belonging and connection. But so many of us spend our lives trying to prove that we are. And the problem there is you never arrive, because you will get a certain job and then a year later go, no, I need this job, then I'll really feel like I can prove that I'm worthy. And then you get that job, you see a better job, or you make a certain amount of money, and then you need something else, you need something better. We're so desperately seeking external things to validate our existence, when we are already worthy of love. And the people that make you feel like that you are worthy as you are right now, they are the people you should be prioritizing. They're the people you're spending time. And you know who they are instinctively. You know the people that when you're around them, you don't need to impress them. You don't feel like you need to prove yourself. They're the people who you should be spending your time with, because everyone listening to this, you are all worthy of love and belonging as you are right now.
Thank you. I was out for dinner with some friends on Saturday, and I just said, You guys are my enthusiasts. That's why I'm up around you. You're up around me. So
Yeah,
I think it's
beautiful.
very important.
That's beautiful.
I do have three kind of very standard questions that have been finished. I do like my questions because I really love listening to my answers, the answers of my guests. And, we talk about, health and well-being on this podcast, but do you have a working definition of what good health means to you in your everyday life?
Oh, good question. Good health. I mean, I can tell you what I know I need to be doing to experience good health for me. And that is good health. Gosh, I'm very wary there'll be doctors listening to this. And so I feel like I need to give more of a medical example, but
No.
It's a great question.
Talk about self-care Sundays. Do you have an ideal day of the way you would spend your Sunday?
Oh, I mean, I fantasize about it. I can't because I've got 2 young kids at the moment, so it's not on my terms. But I do fantasize about my perfect day. I'll tell you what a good health day for me on Sunday would be. It would be a really big running session, sprinting session that is just like pushes me well beyond what I think I'm capable of, and has me lying on the track for like 10 minutes, feeling like I'm going to spew for 10 minutes. But then I get up and then do some form of mindfulness activity. And it's not too early, but it's like early-ish. So probably around, because I needed to have a good sleep. Like I've had 8 hours sleep. Just
just on that note, I have some friends who stayed with me this weekend who are moving to Hobart, and they have 2 young kids, and I took them out for dinner, and then I'm not sure how comfy that bed is in there, but they got up the next morning and they were like, we slept for 8 hours. I don't think they've done that in a very long time.
No, totally. It's the best feeling. It is the best feeling to sleep properly after a while. I'm not doing it. But so for me, it's 8 hours sleep followed by really intense exercise, followed by some kind of mindfulness activity, which might literally be just jogging a few laps of the ash track by myself, listening to what I can hear.
Yeah.
Followed by coffee, a strong latte, 3/4 full. And
Melbourne.
Yes, yeah.
It's made me a snob. I didn't used to drink coffee before I came to Melbourne.
Yeah.
I have a grinder and an AeroPress.
Totally. Good on you. That's the way you should do it. Followed by a very healthy breakfast, and then getting out my little journal, and just writing something, whether it's ideas for the podcast, whether it's planning my week, whether it's thoughts, questions I want to ask my psychologist when I next talk to her. I feel like so deeply reflective on Sunday mornings after having exercised, and then I guess I should probably hang out with my kids then as well as a fulfilling, wholesome thing to do, because they'll be there floating around. And then maybe a beer in the afternoon, maybe 1 or 2. Not. I know that's not great for your health, but I do. I love
doctor's orders on a Sunday.
Yeah, doctor's orders. A pint on a Sunday afternoon, whether it's summer or winter, in a pub with good people is and an early night that's my perfect Sunday.
So you do see that's something you aspire to, because I am conscious you're giving a lot of yourself and you are very busy. When you are challenged, do you have what you've mentioned, mindfulness, any other of your go-to strategies in your own toolbox, any of the techniques that I know that you teach, but
the first thing I do when I go through something difficult is I share it. Like I just tell people straight away. I just find for me, if it's maybe I've got some negative feedback, maybe it's an unkind email about a presentation I did from someone who came along to me speak, or I'll share it straight. I'll talk about as much as possible, because otherwise you just feel shame about it, and it just builds and builds, and if you don't share it, you're not getting empathy, and shame cannot survive empathy. So I just create empathetic environments for myself when I'm struggling. I'll often call mum and dad, tell mum and dad straight away, because they're the most, no one has my back more than mum and dad, sharing your struggles, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. So powerful. Thank you again, Hugh. Thank you so much for making time to speak to me. I think that the work you do is very important. I think it's fantastic. I hope many people listening who weren't already on board with the Imperfects podcast and who hadn't read the Resilience book will do now. I am excited to see where the future for the project will go. And I really hope that we can connect in person, and I'll take you for a run on the beautiful Tassie trails sometime soon. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot, Cheryl. I just think that to have someone of your qualification and your experience to talk about these things, it is so unbelievably powerful and so life-changing. So congratulations on your passion project, because it's bloody important.
You have been listening to Mr. Hugh van Cuylenburg. I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. I'm going to put a link to the Resilience Project website in the show notes and a link to the upcoming shows around the country. I'll also link the Resilience Project book, which is available on Audible. And Hugh and his team have also produced a really useful app, which you can check out. I just wanted to add that if anything that we have discussed today on the show, particularly surrounding mental illness and mental ill health, has affected you or anyone you know, I encourage you to reach out to your health professional or to access some of the other great resources that I will link again in the show notes and we have discussed here. I look forward to joining you next time on the Mindful Medic podcast. Thank you for listening.
We need to get better at just saying, I'm not good at the moment. This is why. I just need a bit of hand to get through this. It takes a pretty strange person to go, no, sorry. I want you to be tough. Don't bring that in here. Like but there are so many industries, and I feel like from what I've seen in hospitals for doctors, doctors' job is to fix everyone else, make everyone else okay. So I guess doctors feel like, well, I can't not be okay because my job is to make everyone else okay. You watch how relatable it is to be able to say to someone, yeah, I'm not okay, but I'm doing my best. I am trying so hard here. And that's what I think is that kind of attitude and behaviour is really healthy.
The MBA New South Wales ACT does wonderful work for those of our colleagues who are at this very minute experiencing a hard time. One way you can show you care about doctors' welfare is to go to their website, www.mbansw.org.au, and donate today. Knowing that their colleagues' care is a big part of these doctors' recovery, so please be part of the solution. All donations are tax deductible. If you can, please consider a monthly donation, as even small amounts collectively will allow them to plan their growth to support the increased demand.